The 2010s were a wild decade. The last 10 years were marked by some incredible accomplishments and crushing defeats. We watched LeBron and the Warriors duke it out, Tom Brady become the GOAT, and Michael Phelps make the world his biatch. Yes, this was the decade where we learned you can return a field goal for a touchdown and that no Super Bowl lead is ever safe. But even those crushing defeats are memorable moments. But what about the ones that you don't remember? Today, we're going to be taking a look at the most unmemorable athletes of the last decade. These are athletes that are so irrelevant that even diehard fans of their teams and sports haven't even heard of them. If you've heard of more than one of these athletes, consider yourself a gentleman and a scholar. So clear out your memory banks as we count down the top 10 irrelevant athletes of the last decade. And if you enjoy this video, do us a favor, smash the like, hit that subscribe button and tap the bell so you can stay up to date with the most interesting facts and stats that will impress your friends. We get things kicked off with Baxter Price, the most non-prolific guard in Mississippi State basketball history. A fan favorite at the SEC college, Price was prolific at, you guessed it, doing nothing. He was so incredible at achieving virtually nothing that he belongs to Club Trillion, a fraternity of players who are able to play at least 1 minute without achieving a single other stat. No rebounds, no fouls, no blocks, no turnovers, and of course, no points. This creates a stat line including a 1 and 12 zeros, so it appears like number 1 trillion. Baxter is not only one of the rare members to Club Trillion, he's actually the president. Old Baxter Statman had 17 1 trillion games, 4 2 trillion games, and 1 game each of 3 trillion, 5 trillion, 6 trillion, and a whopping 8 trillion. That means he played 8 minutes in a basketball game and did absolutely nothing. During his time at the Hump in the 2010s, and yes, Mississippi State fans do call their home arena the Hump, Baxter managed a total of 30 stats while playing 118 minutes, including 0 points. Baxter did score 1 bucket in the 2009 season, but fortunately for us, he peaked before the last decade started. Rico Richardson played for the Tennessee Titans from 2014 to 2015, but he was hardly a titan of the game of football. While Jean-Claude Van Damme made being a hard target cool, Rico Richardson made it an art. In football, a target is when a player has thrown a ball regardless of the outcome. Since targets became a stat in 1992, only 11 players have ever been targeted 5 times or more without actually catching the ball. Most of those 11 were primarily kick returners or gimmick players, but poor Rico was primarily a wide receiver. You may be thinking, Rico must have had bricks for hands, but unfortunately for Rico, the only thing he was receiving was bad luck. You see, Rico played with other non-prolific players, quarterback Zach Mettenberger and rookie quarterback Marcus Mariota. To show how bad these guys are, Mettenberger got benched for Mariota, who got benched for Ryan Tannehill. Richardson suffered throws into double coverage, passes that sailed out of bounds, and balls that went right into the hands of defenders. He was targeted 11 times and was literally never even given the chance to catch one of those passes. However, against the Jaguars, Richardson had a chance to finally make his mark. When the Titans were down by 1 score, Coach Mike Mularkey drew up a play that was designed to specifically be thrown to Rico for the game-winning score. And then this happened. That's right. On Rico's one chance or glory, Mariota got sacked, and Richardson never played in the NFL again. The 2010s were marked by a competitive duel between NBA superstars LeBron James and Steph Curry. One of the least prolific basketball players from the last decade was a combination of their last names. James on Curry was more than a defensive matchup. It's the name of our number 8 irrelevant athlete. Before Curry's shining moment of glory in the NBA, he was an incredible scorer for Eastern Almonance High School in Mebane, North Carolina. In fact, he set the all-time North Carolina high school record in points with 3,307 points. That's a scoring average of a whopping 40.2 points per game. He went on to play NCAA basketball with Oklahoma State, where he set an OK State record with 18 points as a freshman in the NCAA tournament. Jameson was drafted by the Chicago Bulls with the 51st pick in the 2017 NBA draft, but would never play a minute for Michael Jordan's old team. He was waived a year later and went on to play for the D-League, averaging 16 points per game before getting signed by the Los Angeles Clippers. On January 25, 2010, Curry was finally able to live his dream of becoming a professional basketball player in the NBA. During that game against the Boston Celtics, Jameson set a record that may stand the test of time. In the waning seconds of the game, Celtic player Rajon Rondo was fouled with 3.9 seconds left. Curry got the call to enter the game with the mission of guarding his man, and he did that for 3.9 seconds. His man never touched the ball. Jameson Curry ended that game with 0 stats and never played in another NBA game. He holds the record for the shortest career ever for an NBA player, an entire career that can fit into a GIF. Few people have what it takes to be a pinch hitter in the major leagues. It's tough to sit on the bench for games at a time just waiting for the opportunity to get up to the plate. A pinch hitter has to have nerves of steel. Our number 7 athlete is not a pinch hitter. He was a pinch runner, and it's really easy. The only thing you have to do is be fast. Chris Pettit showed up for work on April 8, 2011. The Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim pinch runner was placed on first base with 2 outs in the bottom of the 9th as the Angels trailed the Blue Jays by only 1 run. If he could just get around to home plate, he could be a hero. As many of the athletes on our list, he was never given the opportunity to shine. The batter up to the plate was 24-year-old Peter Burrows. While stealing second could have made sense here, the Angels decided to leave the game's fate up to Burrows' bat, who then struck out on 4 pitches. Pettit didn't advance, didn't steal, didn't get forced out. While he did have a few at-bats in the previous decade, Pettit's entire 2010 career consisted of standing next to a base for 4 pitches while his teammate struck out. At least it wasn't on 3 pitches. Pettit never played in the majors again. Imagine if the only thing you were remembered for as a professional athlete was laying on the ground looking like a crying newborn baby. Meet former Green Bay Packer Maurice Simpkins. We only know who he is or have any footage of him because a football hit a guy in the helmet. Seriously. In football, it's a little harder to record stats than basketball. Many players simply block on every play, and if that block isn't significant like a pancake or a penalty-producing block, then there's nothing for the scorebook keepers to record. So it is rare that a member of the kick return team gets a stat, unless that person, of course, returns the kick. In the case of Maurice Simpkins, he recorded one of the most unusual kick returns in NFL history. Right before halftime on October 10, 2010, Washington Redskins kicker Graham Gano kicked off the ball. Usually the ball sails high in the air, either out of bounds or into the arms of a kick returner. On this day, Gano's kick was a line drive that bounced off the helmet of Packers linebacker A.J. Hawk, who was waiting 15 yards down the field. No one was as surprised as Hawk himself as the ball bounced high off his helmet and tumbled down into the field of play. Blocker Maurice Simpkins knew exactly what to do as he jumped on the ball and waited for the Redskins to touch him, so the play was over. Simpkins cradled the ball on the ground as he laid in the fetal position and was awarded with a kickoff return stat of 0 yards. It can be noted that Simpkins did not fumble the ball, which ties him in first in terms of least amount of fumbles per kickoff return. He had 1 kickoff return and 0 fumbles. We salute you, Maurice. On the flip side of our previous athlete who never fumbled the ball, our number 5 athlete is tied for last when it comes to fumbles per touch, as he touched the ball exactly once in his NFL career and fumbled once. But that is not the most amazing stat. Glenn Winston was a running back in the NFL in 2015. He had a bit of a checkered past that included assaulting a hockey player in college and spending 6 months in jail. Despite all that, he was able to find a job on the most storied franchise in NFL history. Well, the most joked about franchise anyways, the Cleveland Browns. In a game against the San Francisco 49ers on December 13, 2015, Winston took his first ever handoff as a running back and subsequently fumbled badly. The ball came flying out of his hands 8 yards away. As the 49ers scooped up the ball, officially changing possession, Winston walked off the field with -8 yards. This not only gives him the record for the decade, but also the all-time worst career yardage total at -8 yards, which only took 1 carry. Winston never touched the ball again, also giving him the prestigious accomplishment of being one of only 4 NFL players to ever fumble their only rushing attempt in the league. Joel Rico likes to fight. In the 2000s decade, he also liked to play hockey. But in the last decade, he did a lot more fighting than playing hockey, which would be cool if you were a UFC fighter. Unfortunately for Joel, he played in the NHL. You see, in hockey, there are players who are known as enforcers. Their primary goal is to get out there and start fights in order to get their teams fired up or send messages to other players. But at some point, these players have to do something other than fight, right? In fact, they do. They sit in a penalty box like a kindergartner who got sent to timeout for rubbing his boogers on the girl who sits next to him. And few players in the NHL were more prolific at sitting on their butts alone than Joel Rico. In the 2010s, Joel racked up 30 minutes in the penalty box while only playing a minuscule 9.5 minutes of real hockey. Just think, that's less than 10 minutes more professional hockey than you've played. Though I'm not sure how many times you tried to wipe boogers on Susie. In the last decade, only 4 NHL players sat in the penalty box more than they played hockey. 3 of them played almost exactly the same amount of minutes as they sat in the box. Joel Rico spent 3 times more time in the penalty box than playing hockey. Joseph Sandoval was a mixed martial arts fighter in the early part of the decade. His 6-2 record is not that bad unless you consider the 2 losses were his only fights in the UFC, the big leagues of fighting. While he could dominate lesser competition, he was never able to get his game up to make it in the UFC. His first fight in the UFC was against Willel Watson. It lasted 45 seconds. At that point, he was accidentally kicked in the balls. While the fight did go on for another few seconds, after a shot to the cojones, the fight was effectively over. Watson then threw several hammer fist blows to the face of Sandoval, which surprisingly was in much better shape after the fight than his nuts. To make matters worse, announcer and famous podcaster Joe Rogan mocked Sandoval by telling viewers that America loves nut shots. He also warned viewers that this is what happens when you get off the couch. I think I'm gonna stay home. About a year later, Sandoval returned to the octagon to face Nick Dennis, who quickly elbowed Sandoval in the head a few times and knocked him out in 22 seconds. Sandoval never fought professionally in the UFC again, making his career less than 2 minutes and exactly 2 sore balls. Many of the athletes we've talked about today were famous for doing nothing. Our number 2 athlete did a whole lot of something and managed to achieve nothing. Darius Johnson-Odom was a star player at Marquette University, but as many college stars find, the NBA is a totally different animal. Drafted by the LA Lakers in the 2012 NBA draft, he managed to make it less than a year on the team before he was waived. What did he do that was so bad to warrant that quick of an exit from the NBA? Well, he shot the ball. Early, often, and terribly. In a 21-minute NBA career consisting of just 1 game played, Johnson-Odom shot the ball an astounding 11 times without one actually finding its way in the basket. On top of the 11 missed field goal attempts, including a layup, some mid-range jumpers, and a couple 3-point attempts, he was sent to the free throw line once to attempt 2 shots. They're called free throws. That's because they are free. Shots with no one guarding you. And yes, he missed both of those also. But at least he set a record. But probably as you've guessed, if he's on this list, then it's gotta be a bad record. Only 14 players in history have ever attempted at least 3 field goals without ever scoring a point. The second closest amount is 7 missed field goals. Darius had 11. This record may never be broken in the 2010s. Thank Darius for his irrelevance. In the beginning of the video, I told you wouldn't know more than one member of this list. And here's the one that you do know. Angels star center fielder and 5-tool player phenom, Mike Trout. In fact, there's a good chance that Mike Trout will go down as the greatest statistical baseball player of all time. So how in the world does he make this list? Because almost no one knows who he is or could pick him out of a lineup. Recently, a Twitter poll was done on an all-sports account. This person's followers are almost exclusively sports fans, and 1 out of every 3 of those die-hard sports fans has no idea who Mike Trout is. While he is significantly better at his sport than almost anyone in any other sport in history, Trout manages to be less known than Tim Tebow, who hit 163 in AAA last season. He's never even played in the majors and is more well known than possibly the greatest baseball player of all time. That tells you where baseball is in the hierarchy of American sports today. Even MLB Commissioner Rob Manfred has criticized Trout for not putting himself more in the public spotlight. On top of being the epitome of unmemorable, Mike Trout's Angels have been terrible since he arrived. Mike Trout has never even won a playoff game. In his only playoff appearance ever, the Angels were swept 3-0 by the Kansas City Royals. So that wraps it up. Those are the 10 most irrelevant athletes of the last decade. Who do you think will be on the list for next decade? Drop your guess below in the comments. Just kidding. If you can name them, then they are probably not worthy to be on that list. But you can drop a comment and smash the like button if you enjoyed this video. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you are the first to know the most interesting facts and stats that will impress your friends.